So a little while back, I did a video on the Ring of Gyges, and you can find that on my channel. I'll try to link it down there in the description. But I had a thought about it recently, and I thought I'd just do another quick video to get this out there and see if anyone wants to kind of bounce it around and see what comes of it. For those who don't know and don't want to watch the second video, I will briefly go over it here. The Ring of Gyges is a parable, a myth that's told in Plato's Republic really early on in the dialogue. And basically, the format of the Republic is Socrates is being forced to defend justice against those who believe that injustice is better. A lot of people think that doing good is nice, but if you can do bad things and get away with it, well, that's even better. And a lot of the tyrants in the Greek age kind of manifested this. They were kind of bad people and they did really well. So it became sort of a question in the Greek mind whether or not justice was really worth doing or whether it was just something kind of convenient to do. And so the way that this conversation pans out is that various individuals pose this situation where they take a just person and an unjust person and they kind of put them on scales and they say, okay, is it better to have this attribute or this attribute and this outcome or this outcome? And as they're presenting this unjust person, they bring up this parable, the Ring of Gyges. And the Ring of Gyges was actually used much later in the Lord of the Rings. The ring, the one ring of power, as far as I'm aware, was sort of based on this concept, this Ring of Gyges concept. And you'll see in a moment why. I think I'll just read the paragraph. It's pretty short. It might take about a minute. And so they're talking about the ability to do whatever you want and not get caught. So I think it's Glaucon speaking here. He says, "The license of which I speak would best be realized if they should come into possession the sort of power that it is said the ancestor of Gyges, the Lydian, once got. They said he was a shepherd toiling in the service of the man who was ruling Lydia. There came to pass a great thunderstorm and an earthquake. The earth cracked and a chasm opened at the place where he was pasturing. He saw it, wondered at it, and went down. He saw, along with other quite wonderful things about which they tell tales, a hollow bronze horse. It had windows peeping in, and he saw there was a corpse inside that looked larger than human size. It had nothing on except a gold ring on its hand, and he slipped it off and went out. When there was the usual gathering of the shepherds to make the monthly report, to the king about the flocks, he too came wearing the ring. Now, while he was sitting with the others, he chanced to turn the collet of the ring to himself, so he kind of moved it on the inside of his palm, towards the inside of his hand. All right, I didn't need that commentary. When he did this, he became invisible to those sitting by him, and they discussed him as though he were away. He wondered at this, and fingering the ring again, he twisted the collet toward the outside, and when he had twisted it, he became visible. Thinking this over, he tested whether the ring had this power, and it was exactly his result. When he turned the collet inward, he became invisible, when outward visible. Aware of this, he immediately contrived to be one of the messengers to the king. When he arrived, he committed adultery with the king's wife, and along with her set upon the king and killed him and took over his rule. He goes on to say, if someone gets this ring, whether they're good or whether they're bad, are they going to use it? How are they going to use it? And his inference is that they're going to use it in a bad way, in a way that that benefits the person with the ring and that harms people around them. To put it bluntly, they're going to be unjust. So the idea that I had was sort of this idea of anonymity, because in a sense, that's what the ring is representing. It's representing not being responsible for your actions. And it's interesting, especially now. In fact, this video kind of happened, this idea kind of happened all before this Charlie Kirk stuff went down. But what the internet does to people when they think that there are no consequences, when they think that they're just a face in the crowd and there's no way to connect them with their actions. And I'm not trying to make a political statement. I'm not saying that one side does this, the other side doesn't. I'm just saying that it's an interesting phenomena that was noticed a long time ago. And so this idea of becoming invisible and not having the repercussions of the things that you say, the things that you do, is a question of justice and a question of injustice, and whether it's worth it to to be unjust when when there is seemingly no repercussion. And I think the other question, and a bigger question, is as a species, as human beings, is this something that we just can't handle? It appears from the Republic and from at least the interlocutors that are talking to Socrates that we can't handle it. That once we have the opportunity to be removed from the consequences of our actions, once we have this anonymity, um, we tend to do things that we wouldn't otherwise do. And so, as it comes to policy making, there's an interesting question about whether we should have anonymity on the internet. Now, I'm not going to say one way or the other. I think I'll upset people no matter what I say. But I think the idea, especially one that's kind of floating around in policy spaces now, is having like a digital ID. This idea that you are tied to the things that you say on the internet. And when that happens, the internet discourse, the way that we interact with one another, is going to change dramatically. When the name on the other side of the screen is connected to a real person who is verified with a name that I can see, um, people might act, people might behave a lot better. And of course, like people are going to be jerks no matter what. And another example of this is when you're driving in the car. Uh, if someone's in a car and maybe you cut them off, or you do something you're not paying attention, they're more than likely to honk at you or flip you off, or swear. You can't hear them, but they're saying something that's not nice. And they would never do those things if you were both outside of cars. But the idea that they're behind something, that they're being blocked, and they're never really going to see the consequences of their actions, makes them act in a different way. So I think it's just really interesting to think that this idea of anonymity and power was tied together by Plato, over 2,000 years ago, and it's becoming so relevant today in the internet age. And I think there are sort of vigilante, maybe that's the best way to say it. There are sort of vigilante responses to this. The whole idea of doxing and the whole idea of calling people's work or doing that sort of thing is one response and sort of one countermeasure to this idea of anonymity, but it's probably not the best one. Yeah, so that's I guess the main question I'd ask is can we handle it? Can we do the thing? Can we exist in a space where we are indeed virtually anonymous and behave civilly? The internet appears to be a test case indicating that we can't, or at least we can't in a ratio or proportion large enough to ensure civility on the whole. So, I don't know. If anything, it's a good excuse to reread The Republic. I haven't gone through this book in years, but I love it a lot, and maybe I will. So, let me know what you think. I know in some ways this is a sort of a charged subject. I wasn't intending to tie it to anything recent, but I think it's almost unavoidable at this point. So if you got this far, thanks for watching.